Om Jananing Saradang Deving Ramakrishnang Jagadgurung Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. Revered Swami Atma Prabhanandaji Maharaj, Swami Atma Priyanandaji Maharaj, all the revered monks and brahmachari Maharajas, and the distinguished members of the audience. The subject is Sri Ramakrishna and Spiritual Renaissance. Renaissance means, we know, a revival. But given this subject in English, I will venture a bit to think and share with you that what we could have and what we really have achieved in the form of Renaissance as something more than only revival. We will try to dwell upon the uniqueness, novelty of Sri Ramakrishna in the Indian as well as international sky of spirituality. Whatever is possible in our humble capacity, we will think about that. It was near the close of 18th century that a sharp decline started, and it happened with the coming of the Europeans and the almost total downfall of Indian political system, the total defeat of Indians in the hand of foreigners. Political defeat was one thing, but along with it came another sinister thing, and that is the breakdown of the faith in our ancient traditions. This is only normal. Had we been there in that age, possibly we would also have been shadowed by such ill influences. Along with that, the education that was being propagated by the majority of British, saving and except some noble-hearted gentlemen, was an education which was trying to churn out Indians in blood, but absolutely English in taste and culture, but who will be subservient to the foreigners. Now that is a very odd admixture, but that is how things were. The contemporary literature of the West was full of atheism and also contained the materialistic thoughts, materialistic discoveries, materialistic articulations of the then, or rather 19th century science. So nothing wrong with the materialistic findings of science, but when it starts blowing hammer to spirituality, to transcendental thoughts, then things become serious. And also there was the very oaring shadow of Christian evangelism, which did have and which preached loudly hatred against all Hindu thoughts, or for that matter, Sanatan thoughts. The perennial thoughts of India were being chased, debated, unduly criticized by this Christian tendency. As a result of which, India was experiencing strange cultural hybrids, uprooted from ancient tradition and not fortified with modern rational outlook. We had young Bengal. Young is all right, Bengal is all right, but young Bengal was creating havoc in matters of, once again, fighting with, belittling, and trying to erase Hinduism totally. When all these things were going on, then historically, it so happened, we as students of history, Vivekananda Marg said that I belong to science and technology, but all the same as students of history, we revel, we get pleasure in thinking that, that was not the end. And one tendency of coming back was working like an undercurrent, or looked at it in another way, there was a severe backlash against that Western tendency. And reviving movements, reformist movements started cropping up here and there. This morning, we will just name 3 significant movements. First, in 1828, formation of Brahmo Samaj by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Raja Ram Mohan Roy followed by Devendranath Tagore and Keshav Chandra Sen and others. Brahmo Samaj was one such movement during the preliminary phase of that era, which talked about Hinduism standing on its own feet. However, Raja Ram Mohan, being positively influenced by Christianity and Islam, took up a rather intellectual stand and preached the theory or the philosophy of Saguna Brahma, formless with attributes. Now that was one particular thought of Indian tradition, and Ram Mohan Roy stressed on that. The absolute, but not nirguna, with attributes. 2 A's, absolute with attributes, brings us to Saguna Brahma. And there, in brief, what we recall is that in what he said were unmistakable traces of Christianity, rather Unitarian Christianity and Islam. The very strong point of Brahmo Samaj was that it talked in no uncertain terms about equality, liberty, emancipation of women, and it really started a crusade against caste system. These we humbly recall. However, this whole thought process was somewhat alien to customary Hindu tradition. One author points out, little obliquely, that it was a particular it was a particular brand of old wine of Hindus served in new Western bottles. Be that as it may, chronologically, after that we have Arya Samaj in 1875, started in Bombay by Swami Dayananda ji. This again, we recall, is that part of that backlash, a resistance to the onslaught of Western culture. Western culture is not bad, but when it tries to attack other religions, then that is worse. Swami Dayananda, a staunch Hindu, had the primary faith in what? Divine origin and infallible authority of the Vedas. But his cup of tea was only the Vedas and nothing else. Not even the Upanishads not the Puranas, and not to talk about any other belief or denomination. Vedic sacrificial rites were given much prominence by this new order or this thought process. And we should say, unfortunately, clashes started with Brahmo Samaj. Brahmo Samaj was not ready to accept this infallible authority of the Vedas. Brahmo Samaj was at difficulty to digest the concept of rebirth supported by Swami Dayananda ji. And there were other points also. But once again, we take note of, we respect such movements because there were very strong points, like with Arya Samaj, we had abolition of caste, at least within their order. They did it. They talked in very strong terms about the liberation of women and started philanthropy in their way with a large number of devotees, particularly in the field of education. But this one, like Brahmo Samaj, somehow felt itself divorced from mainstream Hindu tradition. Whenever we say Hindu in this talk, we almost synonymously mean the Sanatana Dharma. Lastly, thirdly and lastly, we talk about Theosophical Society founded in New York by Madame Blavatsky in 1875. There were other people also working, but she was the most prominent figure. Now this one, Theosophical Society and its philosophy, was an amalgamation, a curious amalgamation of mysticism, rational philosophy, scientific ideas, plus some sublime thoughts of genuine Hindu theology. But in spite of all these, this mystery mongering, possibly, because we cannot say conclusively, but possibly, this could not pave the way for progress of Theosophical Society in the long run. So, now we come to Renaissance. What was wanting out of these reform movements? Two things. One is a comprehensive approach to Sanatana Dharma and practice. Yes, Saguna Brahma is there. Yes, Vedic karma is there. Accepting and supporting and upholding the superiority of Vedas is there. But at the same time, in the panorama of Hindu thought, one has to take into account so many diverse branches which are really not contradictory. One has Advaita Vedanta on one hand, and one has tantric ways of sadhana on one hand. Now, do I take one and completely reject the other? That could be the way for one sadhaka or sadhika. But as a philosophy, as a movement, as an order, that will be falling short if we do not keep ourselves open, keep ourselves sensitive and vibrant to the comprehensive nature of this Hindu tradition. So this was one thing. And secondly, and maybe more importantly, was that by religion and spirituality. Those days, people used not to say spirituality, religion. So let us take that dharma in India has always meant realization. Whatever is said, does it come from the lips? Does it come from the head? Or does it come from the heart? So religion and realization, happily in English, both start with R. So the Hindus believe that whatever is articulated, whatever is preached, should have realization as the very foundation, as the very core, otherwise it boils down to a big zero. So these movements were lacking in small measure or otherwise in this field of realization. Sometimes it happened that it was intellectually glittering, but then, as Swamiji used to say, the meek and gentle Hindu, he was always trying to locate and discern and rejoice at certain realization beyond these articulations, which was missing in many, many cases. And there comes Sri Ramakrishna in 1836. In him, we find spiritual renaissance, a revival of these thoughts, that through the voice of this quote-unquote priest will be sounded the Indian tradition, the Sanatana tradition in its entirety, stemming from genuine realization. Romarola says about Sri Ramakrishna that he was the consummation of 2,000 years of the spiritual life of 300 million people. 300 million means, as we understand, the Indians, 30 crores. So an estimate of his time, Romarola is saying that Sri Ramakrishna was the consummation of 2,000 years of the spiritual life of 300 million people. And here we have that renaissance, revival, rejuvenation of genuine Indian thought. Not for the purpose of preaching only, not for the purpose of building an organization, but for the purpose of broadcasting loud and clear the glory of God. Such was the mindset of Sri Ramakrishna. Such were his childlike utterances. Such was the unfathomable depth of his realization that people from other sects, or rather other mindsets, the very orthodox ones, the Brahmos, the genuine seekers from other folds, the so-called radical rationalists, they started being drawn to Sri Ramakrishna, which is a matter of fact. And one icon, one symbol of this rational, modern, honest Indian getting attracted to this poor Brahmin of Kamarpukur is Narendranath Datta. Swamiji, when he first met Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar, this episode is not only well known, but so many times heard by all of us. Have you seen God, sir? He asked Thakur. Yes, I see him, just I see you here, only in a much intense sense. God can be realized. So this is the voice of Renaissance. God can be realized. One can see and talk to him as I am seeing and talking to you. In today's language, this is called one-to-one communication. Not very high-flying philosophy, not something very bent and twisted, not something 100% cerebral, but here is Sri Ramakrishna saying that one can see and talk to him as I am seeing and talking to you. But who cares People shed torrents of tears for their wife and children, for wealth or property. But who does so for the sake of God? If one weeps sincerely for him, he surely manifests himself. This was the voice that India was yearning for. And Narendranath shared with his friend Sharat Chandra these words. That impressed me at once. For the first time I found a man who dared to say that he had seen God, that religion was a reality to be felt, to be sensed in an infinitely more intense way than we can sense the world. Narendranath continues to say, as I heard these things from his lips, I could not but believe that he was saying them not like an ordinary preacher, but from the depths of his own realizations. As we were saying, that this was not ordinary Renaissance, not only a revival, but something which had in store some novelty, something yet to be unfolded, or something which can be unfolded only within the inner contemplation of a sadhaka or sadhika, sadhak or sadhika. Sri Ramakrishna, what he was saying was at the same time very ancient and very modern. One modern researcher, Professor Amiya P. Sen, has a very strange and nice and sweet observation about Sri Ramakrishna. He says, at Dakshineshwar, one could occasionally hear Ramakrishna's followers break out in uproarious laughter at something that he had said. In Kathamrita we find Shokoler Hasho. However, when the fun had subsided, at least a few would pause to reflect on the wisdom that lay hidden in the peals of laughter. This is modern Ramakrishna with a hidden message. But this he is not hiding for any other intention, only to be explored by the sincere seeker. And then we find Sri Ramakrishna talking about direct realization of the Supreme Being. And this is very interesting, which we are just sharing with you. As we just heard, to Narendranath he said that, yes, I see him just as I see you here, only in a much intense sense. This is what Sri Ramakrishna had to say, that we have enough of philosophizing. Now the question is, can you feel, can you see the Godhead face to face? Not only to Narendranath, who was to become a monk, but to other householders also. When the question came that, sir, can God be attained in this worldly life? Sri Ramakrishna on numerous occasions has said, yes, definitely. Nishchoy, maidi bolchi. Yes, definitely he can be seen, he can be realized in this very life. Mahatma Gandhi, in his introduction to the biography of Sri Ramakrishna, says, his life enables us to see God face to face. No one can read the story of his life without being convinced that God alone is real and that all else is an illusion. Swami Brahmanandaji once told Master Mahashaya, or M, that Master Mahashaya, this time Thakur has built a bridge between Shibolok or Jibolok. That is so nice. That is what we were saying, that this is not just a revival, but we cannot express with words the connotation of this grand saying, Thakur ebar Shibolok o Jiboloker moddhe ekta setu toiri kore diye gechen. Sri Ramakrishna not only stops there, but he says unequivocally that the only purpose of life is to have the vision of God, Ishwar Darshan. Now that darshan, in whatever terms we describe, is up to us. But time and again, throughout his life, this message comes to us. Maybe this is the most loud message, most significant message from his life. And what about the scriptures? Sri Ramakrishna, while reviving the whole idea, sounds one caution. That what is that? Discrimination or vichara is necessary, sad asat vichara. But one should be very careful where to draw the line. If you bother yourself too much, so this too much is important. If you bother yourself too much with the shastras and the philosophy and the intricate logical framework, then it's dangerous. He says, too much reasoning throws the mind into confusion. To get clear water, if you drink from the surface, you get clear water if you drink from the surface of a pool. Put your hand deeper and start the water, and it becomes muddy. So, this is a very significant utterance, we feel, that there is a thin line between vichara and 100% academic exercise with the shastras and with the philosophy. And above all shines the renunciation of Sri Ramakrishna. We were talking about 2 R's, and here we have come to the third and very necessary R, religion, realization, and this third R has renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna embodied renunciation that doesn't need this speaker to speak out. Sri Sri Ma says, in this age, the special feature of his life is renunciation. Has anyone ever seen such a natural renunciation? Now this is coming from the wife, the divine consort, as we say. She is talking about the natural renunciation of the husband. I don't know whether this will ever be repeated in the history of the world. And finally, on these lines, Sri Ramakrishna and God. So he has said that God can be realized. He has said that your life goes in vain if you don't realize God, if you don't see God. He has discouraged too much academics with logic and philosophy. And he has demonstrated what religious life is all about, what bliss it brings. In the case of his samadhi, Master Mahashaya writes, when he saw Sri Ramakrishna going into samadhi or divine ecstasy for the first time during his 3rd visit to Dakshineshwar, the wonderful thing was happening on the small veranda on the north of Sri Ramakrishna's room. Narendranath was singing, Chintayo mamo manasho hari chid ghano niranjanam. And Thakur was standing still. Master Mahashaya didn't know what was happening. He asked somebody. He became speechless with wonder, actually. And then he asked somebody, and he said that this is samadhi. And Master Mahashaya writes that Thakur is standing motionless. His eyelids remain still, and there is hardly any sign that he is breathing or not. And then as Narendranath continues with the song, Thakur starts shivering with ecstatic joy. Tears of bliss come rolling down his eyes, and sometimes a faint line of smile is appearing on his lips, as if he has seen something unknown to others. This was samadhi of Sri Ramakrishna. And this Sri Ramakrishna, now we will be hurrying up because we are nearing the end of the time allotted to us. This Sri Ramakrishna, what he did, Thakur knew how to separate spirituality from religion. As a matter of fact, he was the first person who has ushered in the thought that spirituality is something and religion is something, though he did not use these words. Adhar Chandra Sen, a great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, during his first visit asked Sri Ramakrishna that is animal sacrifice good? because it is, after all, killing of an animal. Then Thakur says, so here we have rituals, known forms of religion, and something else. Thakur says, yes, it's there in the Shastras that such sacrifice is okay on some special occasions. However, you know, now my state of mind is such that I can't stand to see an animal being sacrificed. Under this condition, I can't take the meat offered to the Divine Mother. So I first touch my finger to it and then to my head. Again, you know, I experience one such condition where I see the Supreme Being in all beings. So now the voice, the tone differs. That yes, I know that these things are there in the religion, in the age-old practice, but I am sharing with you my state of mind. Sometimes I see the Supreme Being in all the beings, even in the ant. At that time, if any living creature dies, I find consolation in the thought that only the body has got destroyed, there is no death of the Atman. So starting from Balidan, animal sacrifice, how Thakur is subtly, very gently, very intelligently, we fall short of words, he's coming to the story of Atman. In other words, this is a gradual shift from Purva Mimamsa to Uttara Mimamsa that we have in Thakur. Jesus Christ said, I didn't come to destroy but to fulfill. Sri Sri Ma has said, he has come not to destroy but to rebuild. Bhangte ashenni, gorte eshechen. This is Renaissance of Sri Ramakrishna kind. He talked about the harmony of religions. He laid tremendous emphasis on harmony of religions. It has been said, ekang sad, vipra bahuda vadanti. But in 2020, the way we know it was really not known to the Indians prior to that. Yes, it is there in the Shastras, but who follows? Who cares? Sri Ramakrishna didn't say all these Sanskrit words, but he talked about a lake with 4 ghats. And then he's saying jal and water and pani, that is known to us. At the end of that story is a punchline. That if someone says that, no, this is jal and not pani, or see, if someone says that this is pani and not water, tahole hashir kotha hoy. It becomes ridiculous. Now, when he said that was one thing. But in 2020, we know that, yes, these ridiculous things are happening in the society every now and then. And here we have the prophet of symphony, as others have put it. And Swami Vivekananda says, when he was given the ovation at Shobha Bazar, Rajbari, after his triumphant return from the West, he says, long before ideas of universal religion and brotherly feeling between different sects were mooted and discussed in any country in the world, here, in sight of this city, had been living a man whose whole life was a parliament of religions as it should be. So this is the new synthesis, the new symphony, and the new getting people together as done by Sri Ramakrishna. Finally, we said that it is Renaissance, okay, but it is something more we feel. In the Gita, it is said, Tadatmanam Srijamyaham. This Srijan is very interesting to this speaker, that this is creation of a new kind. When Sri Ramakrishna says, Swami Saradananda ji has quoted, the realizations of this place, meaning himself, Ekhankar, the realizations of this place have transcended the Vedas and Vedanta. So this is Srijan with a different mood and different tone. When he says that the realizations of this place have transcended the Vedas and Vedanta. In the Mundaka we have Dve Vidya Veditavye, Paracha Aparachaiva. Now in Para, Vidya, when it is said that it is not to be found within 2 covers of a book, we have Sri Ramakrishna, we feel that he is echoing just that Paravidya has to be something which is never written in the books, including the Vedas. Sri Ramakrishna says he is the formless, he is with form, and many more beyond the 2. When he says many more beyond the 2, he keeps ample space, which is absolute Sanatana Dharma tradition. And then this Renaissance, this Srijan has at its core and radiating from its whole body the feeling of love. This is not only, once again, a preaching. This is not only the bringing of a new theory, but Sri Ramakrishna stands as the epitome of love. Swami Vivekananda says, in capitals, he is love, L-O-V-E personified. So Renaissance or Srijan with love is a delicate thing to appear on this world that we had in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. Swamiji says, Bhasharo bhavo sagaro, chiro unmado premo pathar. The ocean. Now ocean has been compared to Satchidananda. So here we have the Satchidananda soaked in love, taking the form of Sri Ramakrishna. Chiro unmado premo pathar. So we rejoice at these ideas that we have Renaissance, we have Srijan, and we have love. Finally, we adore the Renaissance in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. We adore the Renaissance, we bow down to the Srijan, and we surrender ourselves to something else. What is that? Renaissance, Srijan, and then we have blooming of a flower. This is the final thing that we have to say about this Renaissance. This is really Renaissance, Srijan, and more appropriately perhaps the blooming of a flower, the blooming of a lotus that we have in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, the blooming of a Parijat Pushpo. So we adore Renaissance, we bow down to the Srijan, and we surrender ourselves completely to the blossomed lotus feet of Sri Ramakrishna, repeating with Swamiji, Shampado tabo Sri Pado, Bhavo Gosh Pado, Bari Jathai. Dhanyavad, namaskar.